This movie is not even remotely what I thought it was going to be. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though. Welcome back to 31 for 31.
You are about to enter a world of darkness. A world where life and death are meaningless, and pain is God. Woo!
Today, we are taking a look at the Autopsy of Jane Doe, a 2016 mystery horror directed by Andre Overdahl as his first foray into English language film. He had several directing credits before Autopsy, but all of them were shot in Norwegian, which is Overdahl's native tongue. Following the success of this film, he would find more studio work on projects such as 2019's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and 2023's The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Based on everything I've seen from his catalog of directed projects, it seems like Overdahl is really enthusiastic about exploring many different horror subgenres rather than really focusing on one specific style. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is another film to add to the list of projects that didn't have much in the way of support prior to and during its release, but gained a second wind after the fact by enthralling streaming audiences. It stars Brian Cox and Emile Hirsch as a father-son coroner duo who are assigned with a late-night task to perform an autopsy on a woman's body, found perfectly preserved underneath the dirt in the basement of a different crime scene. Emile Hirsch plays Austin Tilden, a young, up-and-coming, and optimistic medical examiner who more or less apprentices with his father, Tommy. The two of them spend countless hours in the autopsy room together, and they use their working and bonding experiences to sort of work out their lingering traumas from the ambiguously recent death of Tommy's wife and Austin's mother. As their autopsy on the unidentified body progresses, they start to unravel the mysteries surrounding their nameless victim as nightmarish visions and hallucinations start to take over their work in the autopsy room. The Autopsy of Jane Doe features many freakish gore sequences. They aren't really played up for scares most of the time. Due to our protagonists both being coroners, the gore is actually handled in a pretty nonchalant way up until around the last 20 or so minutes of the runtime. It's not the kind of movie with gory scenes that I would really consider to be scary unless you get scared by being grossed out, because it is quite gross, believe me when I say that. It's not one of the things that really makes me cringe, but I'm sure there are definitely audiences that would be pretty off-put by some of the autopsy scenes in this movie. The corpse itself, or herself, rather, is played by Olwen Kelly. Her film credits aren't super developed, at least not at this point in time, but her role in Autopsy was mostly just to lay there and be a naked, dead body. For what it's worth, she does a really good job in her role as a naked, dead body. The crew's choice to go with an actor in the majority of the shots rather than a dummy really does a good job of amplifying the kind of ambiguity of how dead or alive this body might actually be, which, without spoiling too much, is a pretty major plot point towards the end of this film. Speaking of this movie's back end, one of my favorite things about this film is the mystery part of its horror mystery genre classification. For the most part, Autopsy is pretty low-key. With a tight runtime of an hour and 26 minutes, the majority of the screen time is dedicated towards our main two characters unfolding the mystery that's been outlined before them with this body. It doesn't get too fancy with crazy cinematography or lighting, instead being more of a writing and acting showcase to frame this mystery with. Since we've covered a lot of visual heavy movies on the show so far, it was kind of refreshing to look at something that was a little bit more traditional in the way it was presented. Hirsch and Cox both do really good work in their starring roles, with their father-son dynamic really developing quite a bit, even inside a film with such a short runtime. If I was to really get into the nitty-gritty of what I don't like about the Autopsy of Jane Doe, it would mostly be in regards to details and plot elements surrounding the mystery that we follow for the entirety of the film. Generally, more in the back end than the front end. I think the process of them unraveling the mystery is done really well. I think the way that they crack the code, as it was, is not very satisfying. And, you know, as I said earlier, I do think it develops well, but towards the end, we're given our big reveal of what's actually happening, and it just doesn't quite sit with me as the most satisfying conclusion that could have been drawn out of all the different possibilities. It's certainly creative and unexpected, but I think I would have liked it more if it had been hinted at in some more creative ways throughout, rather than just connecting all of the pieces at once like what happens at the end or close to the end of the movie. Altogether, I think that I would put the Autopsy of Jane Doe at a solid 6.5 out of 10. I know there are others out there who really sing the praises of this movie and who have a very deep-seated appreciation for it, but I'm just not really one of them. I'd like to remind you that a 6.5 is still very much in the territory of being a good movie. In fact, anything above a 5 could be considered a good movie, at least by my metric of rating scales. When I see some of the other films on the list this year and where they've fallen on the scale up to this point, I just don't really see Autopsy competing with them for my love and affection. If you felt differently, though, consider yourself to be a fan of this movie and have opinions on it. I'd love to know what you thought of it in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed the episode today enough to leave a like or a subscribe to see more, I'd really appreciate that as well. Next up on the list is going to be Terrifier 3, which I have already seen and may very well record immediately after finishing the video for this movie. Thanks again to those of you who have been keeping up as the month progresses and for bearing with me getting a bit behind last week. When you're in college and you do a lot of writing already, it can be easy to get swallowed in your workload or hit burnout a little earlier than I would have last year. Thanks so much for watching 31 for 31, and I'll see you next time.